Without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our wonderful guest this morning. That was really quick. Thank you, Jim. Good morning.
You said without further ado.
That's right.
And so I didn't ado.
Yeah.
10 o'clock on Sunday and you guys are here?
Isn't that amazing?
My God, nerds. Wow.
And it also demonstrates what I've been saying all weekend, that the Urban Fantasy Track has the best attendees of anybody at the con. So thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And you can begin lining up with Sheila, who has her mic. If you would like to ask a question, please go get in line. And as I said, we will attempt to get to as many as possible. The first thing I wanted to ask you about, Jim, was the new book.
Yes.
Which I would like to have. Can you tell us a little bit about it, and then I have a question about it in particular.
It's the first book in a series, and depending on how well it's received, it could go as long as I think about 9 books is what I've got it planned for. It's a steampunk series called The Cinder Spires. I say it's steampunk because there's airships and goggles and tea.
And a cool gauntlet in the beginning.
Well, and that seems to be the main ingredients of steampunks, plus some gears.
Yeah.
And then we're good to go. But it's a steampunk series. I like to describe it as originally I was describing it as X-Men meets Hornblower. But I decided that wasn't steampunk enough, so now I call it League of Extraordinary Gentlemen meets Hornblower, and that seems to be more thematic. But we've got airships, and we've got naval combat on airships, which I've been wanting to write a naval combat book for a long time, probably since I saw Star Trek II, and I've been having a tremendous amount of fun writing the series. I would like to say that you'll like it because though it's a multiple viewpoint series with lots of different viewpoint characters. Like the Alera books, I've kind of compressed the plot into kind of a Dresden Files size space of action. So it winds up being a much more rapidly paced. I'd like to tell you you'd like it because it's got a story world that's a lot of fun, and I'm having a blast writing it. I like to tell you you'd like it because it's got fun characters who are very cool. But really, what's going to sell these books is that there are talking cats, and I've accepted it. The cats are kind of great. They live alongside humanity. They understand English, except when they don't. They're very intelligent. They don't really mix with people a whole lot because people are bad for cats. They do things like give them food and make them dependent, and want to keep them in the house all the time. And that's only acceptable when you want it to be that way. So cats mostly kind of have their own society that lives on the fringes of human society, and yet even though they're cats, they have to be respected because they have opposable thumbs and matches. So you almost have this situation where it's like, I notice your warehouse is rodent-free. Perhaps you would like it to continue to be rodent-free. Perhaps there's some cream waiting for us every Thursday at 3. So that's been a great deal of fun. The basic series it's centered on kind of the home spire of the central characters, the Spire Albion. Everyone on this world lives. The surface of the planet is extremely dangerous to live on. It's like living in a war zone. So most of humanity lives inside these huge black towers that stretch for miles into the sky. The towers are connected in turn by fleets of airships that travel from one spire to the other, and that's how all trade, all diplomacy, all travel gets done. Is by airship. And a couple of these very large and very powerful spires are kind of positioning themselves for a war. And the monarch of one of the spires, the Spirearch, has decided that he needs a special action team to help position his spire advantageously before the war, in the opening stages of what's going to be a war. And so he rounds up all these people, and that's his special team. So he rounds up he gets a princess and a pirate. And a wizard, and because I don't make these rules, man. George Lucas made these rules. and a girl who can talk to cats. Because actually speaking to cats is that this guy's savvy enough to understand that cats are as intelligent as people, and that they see and hear everything. So somebody who's actually on good terms with them is very important. And there's a girl who works in a vattery where they grow meat in vats. And so naturally they have a relationship with the cats because, you know, if you're the one with the meat, the cats are interested in you. So her best friend is a cat named Raoul, and Raoul is the cat character, and oh my God, he is so annoying and so fun to write. And so anyway, so that's sort of the basic series, and they get given missions. And there are duels and talking cats and wizards who are unable to fathom the mysteries of doorknobs, and warrior monks and rival soldiers and all kinds of cool stuff. We've got airships and ship-to-ship combat, and unbeatable dreadnought ships that must be faced nonetheless. And generally speaking, I had a tremendous time writing this book. It's the longest book I've ever written. The first book of this series. I think it checked in at just over 200,000 words, which is a pretty chunky book. I finally got a copy. The book isn't real until they send you the copy of the book that's actually real, and it's just like this. It's like it can stop bullets. It's huge. But it's going to be a lot of fun, I think. Yeah, I think if you enjoy Dresden Files or Codex Valeria, you should like this one as well. So. That's my 10 a.m. Sunday morning sales pitch.
Yeah, there you go. Very nicely done, wouldn't you say? I think that covered it quite well. Now, I have been honored to be able to read a little bit of it, and I would say that the voice is completely different, which is a lot of fun for you, I'm sure, to be able to step away from something that...
Oh, it's great, because, I get to write characters who can... I get to write characters who are debating whether they're going to be killing somebody that another character who's there loves while but they're having tea. So you can't just erupt into violence. There's tea. Well, you can, but certainly not until the second cup. And but it's fun sort of writing these characters that come from this very reserved and structured society, because if you live indoors with 250,000 people, you have a reserved and structured society. That's how it works, or you're murdering one another. There's no way around that. So we kind of have this there's a lot of very Victorian sensibility in many ways attached to the characters who are involved in this. Or at least there are the characters from Spire Albion, because it's steampunk. We got to be a bit Victorian with it, or it's no fun.
Well, we will go ahead and get started with our first question on this side.
Hi, how you doing, Jim?
I'm good.
All right. I got two questions for you. Number one, do we have a release date yet for Peace Talks?
No, they want me to finish writing it before they commit to it. Weirdos.
Well, that actually leads to another question I had, which is kind of related to that. Have you discovered, or do you write both at the same time?
Oh, God, no. Good,
Okay.
Good Lord.
I would think that would be hard.
Yeah, so although I can sort of write Dresden theme projects at the same time. So I've been working on Peace Talks, and at the same time, I wrote a novella that is, the novella is called, what did I call that one? Cold Case. It's Molly's first job as the Winter Lady, and so this is the Molly Ramirez team up novella. So for everybody who ships Molly and Ramirez, I'm so sorry. I mean, you'll like this novel or this novella. And that'll be coming out. That's coming out as part of the Shadowed Souls anthology that I edited. I got to put on an editor hat and edit other writers, and that was interesting because there were some writers that I was like, "This is great. I really liked your story," and they're like, "Yeah, but did you want to edit it?" And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, maybe tighten up that sentence there." And then there were other writers that I was like, this story is fantastic, but it doesn't really start until page 10. Could you just chop the first 9 pages and then get started there? And then I realized, because I hadn't put the alias together with the writer, oh my God, I just told Nora Roberts to cut 10 pages from her short story. She's the proest pro that ever pro to pro, and I just told her to cut 10 pages from her short story. I just didn't put it together. J.D. Robb. I had a different image in my head. Anyway, let's see. I just got done with. I was also concurrently writing a Dresden short story for the Unbound anthology, I think it is, that Sean Speakman's editing, and that's called. It's Dresden's first day on jury duty. And so that was fun, because I had my own jury duty experience, and it's like, okay, Dresden has to do this. There's no way I can waste this much time and not use it for something in the future. So I was trying to make the time count. And then right now I'm writing the short story, also concurrently, that is Butter's first mission as a knight. That one is all kinds of fun because, you know, he's out doing road training with Michael, and he's attached to a bungee cord that goes back to the bicycle, and Michael's randomly banking and braking on the bike to make it impossible to get into a rhythm while you're running, because you know that's the kind of training you need when you want to be a knight. And Butters kind of stops and is like, "What's wrong?" It's like, "Well, I'm not sure." And Michael's like, "Well, why don't you tell me do you see that?" And Michael's like, "No, why don't you tell me what you see?" And he's like, "Well, you see the bum asleep on the bench over there? Yeah, there's a yellow exclamation point floating over his head." And that's how Butters experiences the call. You know, Sonya just kind of feels this instinct to go somewhere. Michael hears a still small voice, and Butters gets World of Warcraft animations.
As you can see, you have a lot to look forward to while you're waiting for peace talks. Yeah. Thank you. We're gonna...
Hello.
Hi.
Codex Alera question for you to break the rhythm.
Okay.
How did Gaius Primus build Alera? And I do mean the Gestalt AI interface, mobile app interface with the continent, not the Empire.
Okay. Gaius Primus, the original Gaius Primus, who was the guy who actually essentially united the continent and said, no, there will be a central rule. We will stop killing one another. Okay, I'm going to give you some Alera background because this is stuff not a lot of people know and that I haven't talked about a whole lot. When the Romans first got to Alera, basically they walked into a fantasy world filled with monsters. So they did what Romans do, which is start conquering everyone in sight. There were a Roman legion, man, and the Roman legion is one of the more idealized colony forces you can imagine. A Roman legion and its camp followers. But they had enemies all around them, which is, there's nothing to unite people like having enemies all around you. And so the society that they developed over the next couple of centuries kind of wound up being sort of this Kali death cult of we must defeat and destroy everyone. And it was they wound up with this very Spartan-esque society. And it was very successful to the point that they ran out of enemies. And when you've got that kind of situation and you run out of enemies, you turn on each other. And so there was several hundred years of people tearing one another up, and finally the warlord who united everybody was the original Gaius Primus, and he was one of the first powerful warlords who also had powerful fury crafting, and he started demanding pieces. I mean, as when he would conquer a place, he would start taking pieces of it away as tribute, and he worked them into the mosaic at the center. And then he wound up discovering that he'd created this gestalt when all he really wanted to do was to be able to look at other places and see what was going on. And then he wound up discovering in doing this, created this person who would show up and talk to him. He thought he was going crazy for a while. And then he eventually realized, oh, I did this, I'm awesome. Because that's the kind of thing when you've successfully conquered a continent and united a society, that's the kind of thing you think of yourself, so. But that was how it originally got done. He was just trying to create a satellite system where he could monitor everybody and make sure that nobody was getting ready to stab him in the back. And he wound up with a goddess as a consulting editor of reality. So
Probably came in handy, huh?
Hi, good to see you.
good morning.
I just want to say, huge fan. You have wonderful work. I'm an author, super inspired by you. I wanted to ask, in terms of the romance between Murphy and Harry, was that something that you had always sort of planned out from the beginning, or as you continued writing, did you notice more and more, oh wow, they have a lot of chemistry, that sort of thing?
I think it was probably inevitable from the first moment of Harry trying to annoy her. By opening the door for her in Stormfront, I think that was probably inevitable. But Harry's romantic life was not something that I had planned out. I mean, in the first two books, Murphy was actually a minor antagonist. She was a minor villain because she kept getting in Harry's way. And that was her role in the story, was to get in Harry's way and to cause problems and to motivate him to get something done. But as far as the romance went, I never wanted to plan out Dresden's romantic life. I wanted that to be something that was organic and grew up as part of the series as it went along. And so I was, I dropped in Susan when we got started because I felt that there needed to be, some kind of a romantic action going on. And then realized that, oh, wait a minute, if I keep going along this course, she's going to be Lois Lane. So then she was Vampire Susan. Plus that kicked off a whole lot of action, and that was a much better way to start a war than what I had originally had planned, which was, basically it was just a fist fight, and then that was going to start the war. It's like, oh no, starting it over a girl, that's a much better. This is my love life. Now, yes, I will go to war with you. That worked much better, but I didn't really plan it. I wanted the characters to grow into whatever was going to happen, and I didn't realize that Susan was going to die awfully until I was writing it, and then I'm like, oh my God, she's not going to live through this. Wow! And considering what I'm going to do at the end of the book, people are going to be so mad at me. Did you? Were you one of the people who threw the book?
But did you then go and get it back?
Oh.
Yeah.
It's like heroin for writers to hear this stuff. It's amazing. Oh, that feeling. I've got to do that some more. I mean,
You did that again in chapter 14 of Skin Game.
okay. I wrote chapter 14 of Skin Game and sent it to my beta readers, and their response was nothing but a bunch of GIFs of people flipping tables. That's what it was. Just there was like 70 or 80 GIFs of people flipping tables that came back as the feedback on chapter 14, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take that into consideration, and so I edited it a bit so that when the book came out, it was even worse. And they were just like, I can't believe you made it worse. I thought for a minute you were going to back off, and then it was worse. And I'm like, you're welcome. I love you. So that's one of the things you love doing as a writer, is you like writing the things that will your audience will react to and will be into and love. Because you could just kind of write the story and make an intricate story or try and do a great passage, but really what I wanted to do is make you flip tables.
Well, you do that very well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Butcher. Kind of a technical question, less story related, but you've demonstrated in the past that you can have moving magic circles, like on the barges, and they still function, the movement doesn't disrupt them in any way. So could that be scaled elsewise, like say, on a piece of wood on your arm, that works as a shield, something like that? Is that still applicable?
That probably wouldn't, because you've got to have some kind of connection with what you're standing on. You've got to be grounded in some sense in order for it to work. Unless you had somebody who was so squirrely that they really thought that was grounding it, was putting their magic circle on a plank on their arm. Because there's nothing that, one of the things that about magic in the Dresden Files universe is that so much of it is grounded in not only in emotions but in your subconscious. So it's got to be stuff that you really believe. I suppose if you are weird enough, you could believe all kinds of odd things about magic and make it happen. Which is why, you know, when you deal with someone, if you're dealing with a wizard who's like literally, you know, actually insane, which is what happens if you start messing with too much black magic, then all kinds of weird mutated things could happen. And I think that probably the nightmare of the council is that you find somebody who's crazy enough to just bring outsiders directly in, and you know, to heck with the gates, we'll just bring them right here, right now. And that is the spookiest thing that the wardens worry about is something like that happening. So there's a very grounded, genuine interest all through the fabric of the Dresden Files universe to make sure that wizards don't do crazy stuff like advertise in the phone book. I mean, you see a wizard that's getting a little bit twitchy, that's genuinely something to fear because, you know, reality can start warping at that point, so.
Hi, Jim. Just wanted to ask, we recently learned that a lot of, at least several Knights of the Cross were very short term. They picked it up, they did their stuff, they put down the sword. Would you consider doing a series of short stories about these short-term Knights of the Cross?
I'd think about it. I don't know if I would. I don't know how I would do that and make it convincing, you know, convincingly cool. It would be a neat project, but not something that I could carry on for a long time. So it might be something like it might be something I do like as a spin-off thing when I'm done with Harry's story. The thing about the Knights of the Cross is it's tough to make them really cool, convincing characters if you don't have somebody to contrast them against. So I mean, it's, you know, Michael can crash through the door being the cool paladin, you know, in the white cloak with the shining sword and everything, and that's awesome. But you've got to have Harry Dresden standing there next to him going, really? or it loses something. I think it can get cartoony kind of fast. You know, but short stories would work. But yeah, most of the Knights of the Cross, they pick up the sword for a day, and they do something that needs to be done, and after that they put it down, and that's the only time in their lives they were ever meant to do that. They were the right person at the right place at the right time, and one of the archangels spotted them and said, "Here, you need some help," and that's how most of the Knights have gone. Or worse, they pick up the sword and do it, and they die trying. That is something that happens with knights as well. Is sometimes you lay your life down, and that's part of the idea of being somebody who is taking danger upon themselves, who is being a sacrifice, who is getting in the way and interceding for other people who can't defend themselves. People who do that, sometimes they get killed, and they understand that. And that's sort of the essence of what heroism is. And a lot of knights they died doing the right thing. You know, so, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
So I just started reading Dresden Files because my sister thrust them at me, and I'm like at the end of Ghost Story roughly, but the entire overarching meta story just seems so incredibly well planned out. Is it something you actually had planned out, or is it something that you kind of just happened?
The way it worked was I got done with the first couple of chapters of the first Dresden Files book and turned it in because it was a writing assignment in college. And it was a writing assignment that I did not want to do. And my teacher had been urging me to write something like it for a while, and I had been ignoring her because I had a degree in English literature, whereas she had merely published 40 novels. And I was going to be a swords and horses fantasy writer because that's what I did. That's what I was going to be. And but finally one semester I decided I was going to prove to her how wrong she was, and I was going to do it by doing exactly what she told me to do. And then she would see. And so I filled out her little forms and did all our little worksheets, and I wrote the first couple chapters of Stormfront, which showed her. And but she read the first couple of chapters and she said, "Well, you did it." And I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "This will sell. I don't know if this will be the first thing you sell, but this is of saleable quality, and you will get this sold." And I sort of blinked because up to that point, her criticism technique, she didn't believe in pulling punches to people who wanted to be professional writers when it came to the editing. And you know, her criticism had included such things as rolling my chapter up into a tube and leaning over the desk and hitting me on the head with it, and asking me what I was thinking. You know, so just like whack. So what were you thinking? You know, like that. I mean, she was very blasé about it. But I said, this was the first time I had positive feedback, so I was like, okay, what should I do? And she says, well, you need to plan the rest of it. And she meant the rest of the book. But I walked back in the next week for the next consult with an outline. And I'm like, this is kind of the whole overall arcing overstory, and I think it'll be about 20 novels long. We'll have a big old apocalyptic trilogy at the end. Because who doesn't love apocalyptic trilogies? Star Wars was an apocalyptic trilogy, and I went on like this for about 15 minutes, and she never got a word in. And finally, I sort of realized that, and I wound down, and I'm like, so what do you think? And I can see her expression and imagine what she was thinking now, in retrospect. And now I know she was looking at me thinking, well, I finally gotten him on board, so I can't just crush him. I'm just gonna have to let Wile E. Coyote here run off this cliff. So she looks at me with just this straight deadpan expression that looked sincere to me at the time, but which and now I realize was patient, and said, she says, I think if you can sell a 20-book series, you know, the big apocalyptic capstone trilogy at the end, yeah, that should be fine. So I've got this notebook that's an outline, and it's like a 2 or 3 sentence outline of every book in the series. That sort of covers the overall the history of the big events that are going to be happening in the Dresden Files. And then the part that gets to surprise me along the way is how the people fold into it. And how they contribute to what's going forward, or who needs to be standing at the right place to make sure that history unfolds, the way I have in mind. I made you cry?
Yes.
Thank you.
So far we have crying and books against the
I was
wall.
at the gym and everybody was giving me really weird looks.
Oh, wonderful. You're welcome.
Okay, Sheila, right up here.
Hi. So we know that the fairy ladies can be replaced, obviously, and I assume that extends on up the hierarchy. So I was wondering if Mab was the first Winter Queen?
No, Mab was not the first Mab. Mab was originally Winter Lady, and Leia was her Jenny Greenteeth. She was her sidekick and handmaiden. And so when Mab got promoted, Leia did too. And so she got to be, much more powerful and awesome. So, but yeah, that was a while back when that happened, and the same thing with Titania. But the Winter Queens actually died the last time things got awful in the wizard world. So the things are about to get awful in the wizard world again, and that's that's kind of they're a bit nervous, and they're a bit nervous about Dresden. As well as Titania is very nervous about Dresden. Mab's keeping her enemies close. So.
Okay, Kevin.
Cool, thank you. 2 quick things. One, stop cursing your books because I'm tired of giving you all my money as soon as I finish one book and I have to go out and buy the next one. The other part is when you're writing and you're in the groove, but then you just start to lose that energy. What do you as a writer find really helps you recharge and get back on track?
Okay. I kind of when I'm really producing well, I'm in a routine. Travel absolutely disrupts my writing like horribly. Like for 5 or 6 days on either side, whenever I'm traveling, it's hard to settle back into the groove and get going again. So I've been limiting my travel as much as I can. But since I've got a fiance who lives 600 miles away, there's been a certain amount of interference in that because I've got this thing where I like being happy. Generally, the way that it works is I've got to have had more or less enough sleep, like at least 6 hours. I need to have actually, been like exercising and taking care of myself. That makes a big difference to getting it done. If I really want to get in the mindset to write, I'll sit down and play video games for a while. It's a professional necessity. Don't look at me like that. And it needs to be quiet where I know I'm not going to be interrupted, which is why most of my writing gets done like between 11 p.m. and 6 or 7 in the morning. That's when most of my work gets done. Normally I turn in around 5 or 6 in the morning after having written for several hours. But when I find myself like stuck and I need inspiration and I've got to get going, I remember what my writing teacher always told me, which remains true for myself, and that is when you need inspiration, just remember, you don't have a muse, you have a mortgage. I'm doing this for a living, so to a certain degree, I've got to write like it's my job, because 'tis. And so there are times when I'm sitting there writing and I don't want to be writing and I don't feel creative and I would so much rather be doing other stuff. But it's time to make the donuts, and I've just got to. I've got to sit down at the keyboard and start going. And really, the only thing I can do is put my headphones on and put on music that I find particularly apt to whatever it is I'm doing. I wrote the entire Molly novella to CNC's Music Factory is Gonna Make You Sweat. Just so you know, that'll be funnier when you read the novella. But anyway. But sometimes you just got to sit down and work, and sometimes it's like pulling teeth through your nose to get good writing to get writing done, and you get done with it and you're like, this is the most wooden, horrible, artificial crap I've ever had, but I've got a deadline, so it's time for the next chapter. But what I've really found is that the experience of writing the novel. The craft of putting it together remains the same whether you're in a good mood or not. And often when I get to the end of a novel, I'll look back at what I wrote when I felt horrible and I try and contrast it to what I wrote when I was feeling inspired and in the groove. And I'll realize that I can't tell the difference between, I can't remember which scene I wrote, how I was feeling. My emotions as I wrote the scene in many ways are not necessarily connected to the scene itself that gets produced, or to the reader's experience of that scene. That's one of the things that's odd as a writer, because sometimes I'll spend so much time and focus on a certain part of the book, and the readers will blaze right by it and never realize, that wait, that was my masterpiece moment. You guys didn't even. No, you just went right onto the zombie dinosaur. Okay. It feels like that sometimes, and that's cool. But it's a big wild experience, and the way I experience a book is completely different from the way you guys experience it. I've always compared it to being a magician on stage. I've got a different view of everything because I can see all the trapdoors and mirrors and smoke and secret twin assistants and so on. Whereas you guys just get to see the trick and get to go yay, and that's your part, and my part is all the suffering and the working, the practice, and that. Don't get me wrong, I love my job, I really do. It's a fantastic job to have. I have incredibly cool problems, that's all you can ask for in life, is to have problems that are really, really neat. And that you can't even really whine about. It's like, oh my God, I'm in therapy because I've signed so many autographs that I've done damage to my tendons. It's like, yeah, I could whine about that, but it's such a cool problem. I got to take ibuprofen before I sign, and I have to do like exercises and things. But yeah.
One other little thing. I tweeted you and I finished the second Codex book, and I said I'm starting the third one. I'm like, why do you write like this? and you literally tweeted me back going, "I need more money, I need it now." It's like, it feels bad.
Yeah, that's why I got into writing, was for the money. I mean, it worked out, but boy, it wasn't supposed to. That was not the brightest thing I ever did. You know, seriously, making a living as a writer. Only about 1 in 10 writers who are published can actually manage to quit their day job. Which is why I've dedicated myself to making readers flip tables, because they'll pay for that. That's what I want. So. Very well.
Morning, Jim.
Good morning.
2 questions. First off, with Dresden. Norse myth has been around in the last few books quite a bit. Odin actually was Merlin's teacher, and Merlin's the one who made Demon Reach. I recall that Odin locked a certain trickster god named Loki up in a cave somewhere. Is Loki in Demon Reach, and will we ever hear from him?
He is not in Demon Reach. There are no snakes dripping venom there, and Norse gods are awfully literal about that sort of thing. I don't know if we'll hear from him or not. Maybe. I mean, by the end, yeah. I mean, we're going to get Wagnerian by the end, but Wagnerian, excuse me, opera fans. But I don't know if we'll hear from him or not. But the Norse gods are a little bit more. I kind of like them for the story because more so than most of the other Western mythos, I think the Norse gods are a little bit more fallible and human, and a little bit less professional wrestler, which is actually what several of the gods are doing, because you get much more worship as a big wrestler in the WWE than you do as a Greek god these days. But anyway, what? It fits. I mean, it completely fits. But yeah, we'll get into it a bit more as we're going up, because I mean, we kind of see, you know, we're kind of bringing in the all stars at this point. You know, Harry's getting to talk with Hades and so on. So everybody's several times I've been asked the question, "Aren't you worried that you're overpowering Dresden? You know, that he's getting all this power ups?" I'm like, no, because I know what he's got to fight. I'm just giving him just enough to keep wiggling on the hook. You know, that's exactly as much power as he needs. So.
Second one's about Alara. You've hinted rather strongly, both in the books themselves and on forums, that the Vord are a terraforming agent created by something else. What's going to happen when that something else shows up and goes, "What the hell happened to my custom order planet?"
Oh, no, what really, the real question to ask is because the Vorg are obviously the Zerg. You know, what happens when the Protoss show up? You know, because I mean, honestly, I was like, I need a villain for this, and what do I need? How about the Zerg? The Zerg are pretty good. We'll use them. I was playing a lot of StarCraft at the time. You know, so. I didn't play nearly as much StarCraft 2 for some reason. It didn't hit me as well as StarCraft 1 did. Or maybe I just gotten too used to playing other types of games. I don't know. But yeah, well, yeah, obviously City of Heroes, because I could play. City of Heroes was awesome because I could play Harry Dresden in City of Heroes and give him a trench coat and everything. And have him run around and give him vaguely wizardy powers, which was awesome. And occasionally run into a reader there. I mean, this was several years ago, so, you know, there weren't nearly as many of you then. But that was a lot of fun, but you couldn't, City of Heroes had a rule that you couldn't use, you couldn't violate any copyright with your characters. So every once in a while I'd log in and find out that Harry Dresden had been changed to generic hero 66745. And so then I would have to contact the staff and they'd be like, well, you can't violate copyright. I'm like, I have the copyright. I'm in fact the only one who can play this character. And finally somebody who was further up the chain, a sysadmin somewhere there, kind of appended permanently to my file, this is actually Jim Butcher, just So then after that, I was playing Harry Dresden and Lieutenant Murphy. When City of Villains came out, John Marcone. John Marcone was a mastermind in City of Villains because that was the coolest class to have there. So.
Okay. Oh.
Hi.
Oh, no.
So, Leah's gonna get a bigger part in the next book, right?
Oh, golly. Yeah, see, you ask that because it's gonna look real bad when I say yes, because you already know she is. This is my fiance, Kitty Krell. She plays the non-chief for the Dresden Files fan film group, so you can see her in the Dresden Files fan film, the DF3. You'll be able to, if you look at their stuff, they did the trailer for Skin Game, and they'll be doing the trailer for Peace Talks as well, I think, or at least I hope they will. But anyway, so you can see her in many pictures. As well as in pictures with me, if you have any Facebook access at all, we're all over there. We're ridiculous. But good morning.
I like the Gomez and Morticia, by the way.
Thank you.
So hey, boss. I got sort of two subconscious questions for you and how it sort of interacts with magical gear.
Okay, I'll try.
Can I block lightning bolts from Thor? And the sort of more complicated one is exactly how is Bob reacting to my subconscious? Like, how does that work?
Oh, Bob. Okay, when you're Bob's owner, when you're the one who's in possession of the skull, Bob acknowledges you and who you are, and Bob, as a spirit of intellect, kind of takes his shape based on what you look like and the way you are. He's sort of a mirror. So. Horribly evil necromancer guy picks up Bob the Skull, he's horrible and evil. And you know, Butters picks him up, he's even nerdier. Which basically how it works. Now, what was the first question about blocking lightning bolts?
Lightning bolts, right saber.
Oh, with the right saber?
Yeah.
The right saber, right? I don't know, I haven't gotten to play too much with it yet. I know that the sword of faith, as purely as an expression of faith, is both more and less powerful than it was before. For example, it's going to be way easier to misuse than just the standard sword would be. And I think it has less of an effect on just sort of regular, everyday, are they, kind of muddled human beings. You're just not going to be able to use it on them. It's going to be like hitting them with the cardboard core of a gift wrap, of wrapping paper. It's going to be like hitting them with that. And even that's wrong and will make the sword vulnerable. But on the other hand, it's just going to be hell on wheels against the truly evil. So poor Butters, he's going to be like kind of trying to thrash his way through a situation, trying to figure out what's going on. And the horrible demon pops up and he'll be like, oh, thank God. Now we get to the simple part. The poor guy. I mean, he's not even going to get the full sword experience of at least I have something sharp and menacing. He doesn't even have that. So, poor Butters. I often think that about many of the characters. Poor so and so. I'm writing the next book right now. It's poor Murphy.
More tears.
People are like, people get on Twitter and they'll be like, what are you working on in Peace Talks right now? And it's like, I'm not going to tell you guys that, but I have to answer stuff like that. So I kind of take the line from Mean Girls. Your mother's chest hair, and that's what I'm thinking in my head when I go Murphy's funeral. I try not to be a smart ass about that. I always try and be kind, but sometimes I just can't not. And I would apologize, but it's just nothing I can do about it. It's involuntary. So. But thank you, sir.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just want to throw out my fiance and I met because we started talking about your book, so thank you.
You're very welcome.
But my question is, a lot of the short stories get continuity nods from Harry when it becomes relevant. You've done at least 3 comics now, totally independent, and probably more.
Yeah, more.
Maybe I've seen like 1 line. Are there going to be more nods to them once in a while? That'd be really nice.
Are there going to be more what?
Like, when he flashes back to something that happened like in a comic, I almost never see those sort of continuity.
Oh, yeah. We'll keep hitting those. I always like kind of dropping lines and bits and pieces of things that happen that aren't going to come into part of the story, because in my head there's all these stories that happen that aren't big enough or relevant enough to fit into a novel. But I want to say, it's, you know, where were you? I was in Minnesota. Somebody saw something in a lake. You know, and I just leave it at that, and that's all I need. But I always wanted to create a sense that Dresden has got all these other things going on all the time that you just don't get to see, and you're basically just spending the worst weekend of his year with him. And that's what the books are. You know, it's like, what is going to be just absolutely the most hellish weekend of Harry Dresden this year? Okay, I'll write about that. And that's sort of the way my mind works when I'm putting together the story. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm continuing to write original comic stories. So I'm going to be working on that, and you know, I'll be able to do a little bit more after we do Mirror Mirror, because after I establish parallel realities, and that there's so much more trouble I can get into. But that's not till next book, so you know, we'll do that then. Yeah, I'm doing 2 more comics with Dynamite, and so I've got to come up with original stories and get those outlined and sketched out and over to them by Friday. Oh my God, by Friday. I've got to go. But yeah, we'll do some more of those. I like the idea of kind of writing these smaller stories and putting them in the comic books, because that's so much fun. So, you know, in the one short story where Harry walks in at the beginning and starts it off by walking in, him and Molly walk in covered in slime, and he throws his coat in the fire to cook the slime off. I decided I really want to write the slime golem story that went before that, and so that's the most recent comic. It's called Downtown, and it's the slime golem story that went before that. And that was all kinds of fun to write, and I'm getting more used to working with Mark Powers and the folks at Dynamite, and so I'll just be able to say, like, okay, here, we're going to need to have Molly do something along these lines, but you make up what she's going to be doing, because when you're working with other creative people, they also like to be creative, as it turns out. So that's been an adjustment for me. Is you know, letting go of my stranglehold on the Dresden Files a little bit. Say, no, here, you can play a little bit too. Okay, there. Not like that. Not like, give me that. Okay, we'll try this again. Here. It's definitely a psychotic kind of feeling to see other people work with the stuff that you made.
Thank you.
Very well.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so in previous interviews that you've given, you've mentioned that Mab and the Sheed have all progressed and developed into the creatures that they are, from like dewdrop fairies and stuff, and they've just taken on influence and just really hulked out and gotten pretty cool. You've also said, though, that Mab and a lot of the Sheed all have like mortal origins, like changelings and scions and stuff. Could you reconcile these kind of contradictory thoughts here and there?
I could, but I won't. I'm not gonna tell you. The She were created for a reason, though, and they were created specifically by certain agents who no longer had as much influence on the world as they once did. And I've hinted at that in some previous books, and I'll leave the rest to you to come up with, because that's perfectly enough material to come up with fan crack theory. And fan crack theory is awesome. I love reading fan crack theory. I will go through occasionally and just look at the crack theory boards, and it's like, excellent. And occasionally like, ooh, that's actually better than what I had planned. Sure.
Hi.
Hi.
So you've written now these 2 series, and you've got Cinder Spires coming out, and the character of Octavian, when I finished Codex Alera, I just couldn't help but notice how different he was to Dresden in his arc, how he started with no power, how he has this sort of successful love life that persists throughout the series, which is great to actually read about in a book. It's like a successful relationship. But did you?
I figure they've got to happen sometimes. You know.
Did you set out to write Octavian as kind of this opposite to Dresden? Who's
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the exact plan, is I want to create a protagonist that is as different from Harry Dresden as I freaking can, because I'm going to be writing something I don't want it to seem like the same thing. He was completely the opposite of Dresden. In every way, and including to being of smaller physical stature than average, and so on. And I had reasons behind it, and I knew I wanted to have him grow up and be, mighty hero. But I wanted him to start off from a very different place, and for us to see all that happening. Harry sort of shows up, and you see somebody who is equipped for heroage, from the get-go. But Tavi, I wanted him to be somebody that you got to see grow into it. And I mean, it's a coming of age fantasy is what it is, and as he grows up into it, but a coming of age fantasy with aliens. But yeah, I mean, I wanted it to be very different. I wanted him to have a different life than Dresden does, but poor Dresden, I mean, damn. I've kind of, but on the other hand, Dresden's life, maybe he might get a happy ending someday. I mean, that's still possible. Whereas Tavi gets to, he gets to be the administrator of an extremely large corporation and have all kinds of headaches and do boring things like build roads for the rest of his life. Poor guy. He's got to go be the leader. That'd be terrible. Sure.
2 questions.
Okay.
Where does Bob come from? Where was Kimler his origin? And then the other question is like, when the Order of Black Luminaries are about to kidnap the archive, and Nicodemus is about to say something to Dresden, what is Nicodemus about to say to Dresden?
Yeah. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and reread that. You guys got to understand that you get to read the one version of the book when it's done. I get like 13, or like between 6 and 13 slightly different versions of the same book every time I see it. Every time I work on it, and then plus I've got in my head all the books that I could have written and didn't, or turned aside from. So I've kind of got this real type view of a spectrum of parallel realities proceeding ahead. Whereas you guys only get to see that one, so I don't always remember everything. I don't know. Nicodemus was probably going to say something exasperated. It's if I remember correctly, and Dresden would have gone like yay, but instead other things happened first. As far as where Bob came from, Bob was originally created by Etienne the Enchanter in medieval France. And Bob got born exactly the same way, more or less. It was like a different agent, but more or less the same way that the new intellect spirit gets born out of Harry's head. And actually, that's where Athena came from. She was the same thing, except it was Zeus that got her started. So she kind of had more muscle. But you'll get to see Bob's origins when we see Bonnie in the next book. Harry named her Bonea, which means beautiful, but more importantly, it has the word bone as part of the name. And she lives in a skull, so a little wooden one for now, but he'll make her a more deluxe one later. But anyway, so there you go. That's where Bob came from. But Bob's had years and years and years. He had generations worth of wizards to work with, to learn and grow and to become and to grow in knowledge and in the wisdom of applying that knowledge to the world. Whereas Bonnie she has all this knowledge and no idea how it applies to the world. She works out that pancakes are inanimate, and that's a leap for her because she's got no experience. So really having one of those intellect spirits is just a giant pain, like the first 3 or 4 generations. They take a while to get anywhere. But, do we have time for one more?
We have one more question, and that's time for one more question.
So you were saying that you originally wrote an outline for the entire series. I was wondering if you, after the series is over, if you would be able or thought about writing like a behind the scenes of writing this epic series like you do for movies and stuff like that. Like that would be such an interesting thing for to publish that original thing.
Behind the scenes for the Dresden Files when it's done, maybe. But on the other hand, I still got to make a living after it's over, man. I don't want to tell everybody how I do what I do. Sure you could, anybody could. What I do as a writer is it's 1% inspiration and mostly it's work and practice. Anybody who wants to be a writer, if they want to go out and learn the craft, not everybody can be a truly great cabinet maker that makes cabinets that kings and queens buy. But everybody can learn to go out and make a cabinet if they want to spend the time and the effort, if they want to invest in learning the craft of how you put it together. And a story is no different. Some people will be born with more aptitude for it, and some people will be born with less. If you read the first 8 novels I wrote, you would not think I was born with aptitude for storytelling. I was not. I was terrible, man. I would not make Osama bin Laden read my drawer books. I would not have done that. I am not that cruel a person. But I kept working and I kept learning, and after 8 years of working a part-time job nobody paid me for, eventually I managed to kind of stumble into, okay, finally I'm starting to get it now, and I keep working at it. But really, it's all about work and practice, and much less about being a wonderful, brilliant artist. Mostly it's just you have to be enough of a nerd and have few enough friends that you can sit alone by yourself in a room many hours a day, and work on your stuff. And I was that nerd, so it worked out for me.
I don't mean to try to imitate you. I meant more to your.
Oh yeah. I'm making
information.
jokes because really anybody who wants to make a really cool, incredible story, if they want to work at it hard enough, they can do it. That's not even an issue. But maybe I will. But mostly, I don't really articulate a lot of this anymore. After you've been working with your tools for a while, you don't really stop and think, okay, I'm going to need the miter saw in the box. I'm going to need my ruler and a couple of pencils. You just do it. You just do it, and that's kind of where I'm at. I just do it. Okay, well, I can do the outline at some point. I'll get the old notebook out, and if you can still read the pencil, I'll photocopy it and say, there.
There you go.
But you'll all be disappointed.
Well, right, we do have to say goodbye, but one thing I wanted to ask you is last year's humor panel that we had in the track room, you described Harry as the Charlie Brown of urban fantasy. How would you describe one of your Cinderspire's characters? Of what of steampunk?
Oh, they're going to have to be the X-Men of steampunk. I mean, really,
okay. That's what you guys have to look forward to, end of the month. Let's thank Jim for being here this morning.